thank you, young people, and thank God for you. That deserves another amen. Amen. It is a joy and a privilege and a blessing and a pleasure and a glory, hallelujah, and a great getting up morning to say happy birthday, Easton. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. And it's a joy to be with the president of our House of Deputies, President Gay Hart Jennings, and to be with brother bishops who are here to celebrate with you and those who have served here, as well as those who have been friends of us all here. It's a joy to be with them and to bring you greetings from your brothers and sisters who are the Episcopal Church, wherever they may be. There's a great shout going on in the Episcopal Church right now, and it's going on to celebrate the Sesquicentennial. I practiced that on the plane. The Sesquicentennial of the Diocese of Easton. Happy birthday, Easton. Happy birthday. And to be able to hear the voices of young people. They don't have to be here. I know a few may be here under duress, but most of them, they don't have to be here, and they don't have to be in church. And we must support them and enable them and encourage them for the living of these days to follow in the way of Jesus. And we thank God for them and pray for them. May their tribe increase. Allow me, if you will, then, to offer I hope words of encouragement and to challenge you. It is not just the future that beckons before us, it is the present. In the present moment, whether it is reflective of Dickens' old words, these are the best of times and the worst of times. That's probably true. That's all time. And yet there is a particular poignancy, I suspect, in the moment in which we are living. We are particularly fractured here in this country. I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat or no-crat. We got some issues here. Am I right, church? Yeah, we got some issues. And the truth is, it's not just here. There is a global phenomenon. I was at a meeting of the primates of the Anglican Communion, who are the archbishops and presiding bishops, and I never thought I'd be called a primate in my life. But anyway, I jokingly refer to it as the Anglican Anthropological Association. But even at that meeting, we were discussing the rise of fascism, the rise of totalitarianism, the eclipse of freedoms, the rise of suppression of press and media around the world, the rise of nativisms, the emergence of nationalisms, the closing of borders. I'm going to get in trouble now. The building of walls. Help me, somebody. It's going on around the world. Brexit is not just about economics in England. It is about the migration and immigration of peoples throughout Europe as well. But I've been on the continent of Africa, just came back from South Africa. And in Africa, the question of immigration, of sealing borders, it's raising its. Part of it is related to climate change. The earth is destabilizing. And people are being forced to find food wherever they can go and security wherever they may be. We got some issues. And I want to suggest that maybe never before has there been a need for folk who would dare to be witnesses to the way of Jesus of Nazareth, witnesses to the way of love, We need some witnesses. Oh, we need some witnesses, church. We need some witnesses to a kind of, oh, I'm getting in trouble, but to a kind of Christianity that actually looks something like Jesus. Something like it. We need some witnesses. So let me give you a text, because we should have one. It's found in the first chapter of the Acts of the Apostles. You know this one. It's after the crucifixion and the resurrection, and moments before Jesus returns to the fullness of the Godhead, the ascension, as we call it. Jesus has this last conversation with his disciples. The Bible says, so when they had come together, they asked him, Lord, is this the time when you will restore the kingdom to Israel? Jesus replied, it is not for you to know the times or the seasons that the Father has fixed by his own authority. But you will receive power. Know this, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses, there's that word, in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, and to the uttermost parts of the earth. You will be my witnesses. Notice the pronoun, my witnesses, in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, and to the uttermost parts of the earth. First century Palestine, 21st century Cambridge, and I don't mean England. My witnesses. My witnesses. Now, I know that Episcopalians aren't used to being called witnesses. But let me make the case quickly and then get to the point. It's in the Bible. I'm not making this up. It's there. I mean, it's in the Hebrew scriptures, Isaiah chapter 43, verse 10. God says in the beginning of those servant songs, you, Israel, you will be my witnesses. You will be a light to the nations, my witnesses, in the Bible. It's there in John, the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, speaking of John the Baptist, as it talks about in poetic language the coming of Jesus, the Word of God, into the world. It says, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. And then it says, he came to bear witness to the light. He was not the light, but he came to bear witness. And then if that's not enough, in Luke chapter 24, at the end of Luke's gospel, again, Jesus says to his disciples, it is written that the Messiah must suffer and then rise from the dead on the third day. And it is necessary that repentance and forgiveness of sins will be proclaimed to all creation. And then the text says, Jesus says, and you are witnesses of these things. And then alas, when y'all know the apostles had a problem, after the crucifixion and the resurrection, they had to replace Judas. We've been doing that ever since. But they wanted to make sure they replaced Judas in the spirit of Jesus, not in the spirit of Judas. And so they had to replace Judas, and one of the criteria that they used for finding a suitable replacement for Judas was they had to have someone who had been a witness to the resurrection. It's in the Bible. I'm not making this up. And then our text, you will be my witnesses. It's all over the Bible. But I've been an Episcopalian all my life. And I may not know much, but I do know Episcopalians. Many of them are lawyers. And if there is a loophole, we will find it. And the default loophole is, if it's not in the prayer book, we don't have to do it. Right? So over the years, I've done a word study of the Book of Common Prayer. And lo and behold, in the Book of Common Prayer, brother bishops, in the ordinal for the ordination of a bishop, the prayer book says, and we just ordained a new bishop of Kansas yesterday, and we read these words, and I quote, a bishop, this is in the prayer book, a bishop in God's holy church is called to be one with the apostles in proclaiming Christ's resurrection and interpreting the gospel, check this out, and to testify. Oh my God. Oh, I got 6 years left. I'm going to get these bishops testifying before it's over to testify. Oh, we need witnesses. Right there in the book. But it doesn't just apply to bishops. Lo and behold, if you look in the catechism, page 855, that is the teaching office of the church. In the catechism, one of the questions is, what is the ministry of laypersons? Now, the actual definition of a layperson is anybody who's been baptized. Anybody here been baptized? Let me see some hands. Oh, we got some baptized folk in here. All right. And it says the ministry, this is in the catechism, the teaching of the church. The ministry of laypersons is to represent Christ and his church and to bear witness to him wherever they may be. Oh, I'm Perry Mason. I'm making this case. And then if that's not enough, in the service of holy baptism and in confirmation, I figured out the theology of confirmation. Confirmation is predicated upon the fact that the church has experience of Christians and know that Christians have short memories. And that we have a tendency to forget what we promised to do or what our godparents promised us to do in baptism. So just in case you forget, we send a bishop around every couple of years to remind you of what you promised to do in baptism. And so in both baptism and the reminder of confirmation, the prayers of the people, this is in the prayers of the people, the last prayer over the candidate says, and I quote, now send them out as witnesses to your love. Oh, my brothers and sisters, I think the jury is ready to vote. And last but not least, page 366, the post-communion prayer after Holy Communion says, and I quote, and now, Father, send us out to do the work you have given us to do, to love and serve you as faithful. We need some witnesses in the Episcopal Church. Witnesses. But I know part of the dilemma is like me, to be honest. I hear that word witness, and I think I'm home in Raleigh, and Bishop Parsley's in North Carolina. He knows what I mean. The grass is green, and it's a Saturday morning, and I get up, and I go in the kitchen and take out some bacon. Not my wife's vegetarian bacon. My bacon, which is pork. And I start frying the bacon and toasting my English muffin and brewing the coffee. And the smell, there is nothing like the smell of bacon and coffee in the morning. It really is incredible. It is incredible. Anyway, that smell is just kind of wafting over the house. And then I get my coffee and I sit down and take my pad and read the newspaper or whatever and look out, and it's sunny outside and it's beautiful, and somebody's cutting their grass and you can smell the grass, and their children out, riding their little tricycles or whatever, and they're playing, and it's just it's God. God is in his heaven and all is right with the world. And I look out the front window, and off in the distance I see two people walking through the neighborhood. And they've got a little bag in their hand. Yeah, y'all have gone to church with me already on this one, haven't you? And they're walking toward our house. And I realized that that's not Episcopal Life or Episcopal News Service that they have in their bags. And so I do what any Episcopalian would do. I get down and I and I pull the curtain and pray they don't come to the house. Am I right about that? I understand the dynamic of witness, and yet I have to tell you, we really do need some witnesses in a variety of ways. We need some witnesses in our time and in our world. We need them. Truth is, not long ago, the then Bishop of Virginia and I were on the telephone. It was the end of the day. It was August. It had been a hot day. And he and many of the clergy and lay people in the Diocese of Virginia, in the areas of Charlottesville and around, and other Christians and people of other faiths and people of goodwill and human decency had gathered to make a protest. No, to bear witness as neo-Nazis and Klansmen, not dressed in hooded garments, but in khaki pants. Young men and women, age 30, in America. Nazis marching through the streets of Charlottesville with tiki torches in their hands, shrieking, "Jews will not replace us." Shrieking hatred against racial minorities. Shrieking hatred against gay and lesbian people. Shrieking hatred and vitriol in America. Not in the 1930s, but in the 21st century. In America. My uncles fought in World War II and lied about their heroism, but were proud to have served in the Allied armies to stop fascism in this world. And here, in America of the millennials, young men and women shrieking hatred. At that point, I said to the bishop, I said, "Look, I don't know what to do, but I'll do anything you and your people feel that will be helpful." And a few weeks later, he called and said, "Would you come down and just make a pastoral visit?" It wasn't a press visit. It wasn't a media visit. It was just a pastoral visit to be present. And I went and just listened to people who live in Charlottesville, people who've been there. These marches have been going on for a while. We just saw it on TV. And listened to the stories of quiet heroism of people who, when hatred was being shrieked, just saying, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine." People who said, "We will not let hatred and bigotry and violence turn us around. Love is the way." And they asked me to preach later that night in St. Paul's Church, which was the church where the Nazis were marching to that night when you saw them on TV, because that night they were hosting an interfaith service of Christians and people of other faith and goodwill who gathered together under the rubric of love. And Nazis were marching to stop that. And I remember getting up in the pulpit and looking at the congregation, and I have to admit my heart was really heavy for what is coming upon the land. What is happening to us? And then I looked and saw a friend, an old friend, Charles Marsh, professor at UVA, who's written a lot about the spirituality of civil rights and the work of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He wrote one of his first books at the cathedral in Baltimore a number of years ago. And in one of his books called The Beloved Community, he said this, and I quote, He said, it is salutary to remember that Jesus of Nazareth founded the most revolutionary movement in all of human history. A movement of people who were committed to his way, the way of unconditional, unselfish, sacrificial love. And by being his movement, following his way of love, they were changed, and they changed the world. We need a Jesus movement today. A movement of love, committed to love as the way of life. And I'm committed. I love me some Jesus. I know I'm gonna get a boy when I finish up this term. Folks will say we done heard enough about Jesus for a lifetime. I said that's true because it'll get you from here to glory too. So that's all right. But I'm not a scholar. I'm a country preacher, and I'm fine with that. But what little bit of church history that I do remember from seminary, there is a pattern that is discernible in Christian history. That every time Christians as individuals or communities or as the church, every time the further we have strayed away from the teachings and the spirit and the example and the person of Jesus of Nazareth, when we have strayed away from Jesus, we have lost our soul. We have lost our soul. And I mean, I can give you some good examples. This is the land of Harriet Tubman, and the land of Frederick Douglass is not that far from here. And Frederick Douglass noticed this pattern, and he said, and I quote, he said, between the Christianity of this, y'all know who Frederick Douglass is. Okay. He said, just checking, I just want to make sure. He said, between the Christianity of this land, speaking of America, before the Civil War, while slavery was enshrined in the land and justified by Christians, he said, between the Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ, I recognize the widest possible distance. The further we have strayed from Jesus of Nazareth, from his real teachings, from his real spirit, the further we have strayed from our own soul as Christians. Oh, I could go on. I could talk about the Barmen Declaration in Nazi Germany, about Christians who spoke of the Führer, and Christians who stood up and said, there is no Führer. God is the only God, and Jesus is Lord. Oh, we could go on. And we could talk about Mahatma Gandhi, who one day said, you know, I love your Christ, but I ain't too sure about you Christians. And I remember when I was in college, I took a course, or a couple courses in literature, to be honest, not because I was really that interested in literature, but I was interested in a girl who was really into literature. And so in spite of myself, I actually learned something. And one course in particular, we read Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. I'm just proud that I can even say it. Anyway, we read it, and I don't remember all of it, but the part I do remember is probably the most well-known part of the Grand Inquisitor. And the setting is in Seville during the Spanish Inquisitions when Christians did evangelism by persecution, by torturing folk and killing folk. And I was just reading about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Sister AOC. That's an interesting sister, let me tell you. I mean, she's interesting, but they were talking about her background, and she's from Puerto Rico, her family's from Puerto Rico, but ultimately from France, and her family were Jewish. Some of them were Jewish at the time and were persecuted by Christians in Seville. Further we get away from Jesus. Anyway, in Brothers Karamazov and the Grand Inquisitor, Jesus comes back. This is what Dostoevsky said. He said, Jesus comes back to medieval Spain. And he comes back, and just like the first go-round, he's preaching to folk. And the poor folk are getting it. The common people, they understand him, and they start to follow him. He's healing folk. He's touching lives, and they love him. And the church got an issue. And so they arrest him. And the Grand Inquisitor comes in to interrogate him. And he said, Jesus, you don't understand. You made a mistake. You remember when the devil was tempting you in the wilderness? You should have taken the offer. It was a good deal. The dude said, man, I'm going to give you all the kingdoms of the world. I'm going to give you all the power you need. And you can feed all the hungry people you want. You can do all the social good you want. All you got to do, brother, is just come on, do an Anglo-Catholic move and bend that knee. Go down and bend that knee to me, and I'm going to give you everything. He said, but Jesus, we the church, are going to correct your mistake. We have an alliance with the devil. We got a partnership, and now we're going to rule the world. My brother, what Dostoevsky was trying to tell us, the further we go away from Jesus of Nazareth, whether it is as individual Christians, as the church itself, the further we go away from our own soul. I want to suggest, and I'm going to get in trouble for what I'm about to say, that there's too much Christianity in this world that doesn't look like Jesus. It's not about love. And we need churches like this church. Churches, mainline churches, folk of decency and goodwill, but we need some Christians to really stand up for Jesus. That's what we really need. Because the truth is, I'm getting clearer and clearer, and I'm going to sit down and shut up in a minute. But I'm getting clearer and clearer about, I've had some sicknesses and had surgery. I had brain surgery, and a couple years ago, hit my head and had brain surgery, and then turned around and had prostate surgery. I said, Lord, what is just happening to me? But anyway, I'm starting to get real, because every time you go in surgery, it's time to get right with the Lord. Get right now. And so I'm trying to stay right with the Lord now. But I'm getting clearer about what the core, the kernel, the essence of what this Christian thing is about. I'm convinced that Jesus was unambiguous, incontrovertible, and decisively clear about the essence of what it is to be a follower of Jesus. And we must reclaim that again in our time. I saw it again pretty clearly over Christmas vacation. And President Jennings has heard me say this before. I was at home in Raleigh, and I might as well tell you a little secret. I hope my brother and bishops don't. I hope I don't get in trouble for exposing one of our Episcopal secrets. But the truth is, bishops don't work very hard during Christmas. and presiding bishops work even less at Christmas. Nobody wants to get confirmed on the Sunday after Christmas. I mean, it just, no matter how hard you may want to. I mean, it is actually a nice time to kind of just relax, do Christmas midnight mass and all that, and then the rest of the time go play with the grandchildren. It's that kind of thing. And so over Christmas, I was, as I have for many years, I didn't tell the people in the Diocese of North Carolina this when I was the bishop there, because I wanted to keep the payroll coming in. But I was sort of relaxing at home and doing things I don't get to do normally. And as a result, I was watching, a lot of TV. And there's some interesting shows on television. One of my favorites now, one of my favorite shows, I just have to admit it, is I love me some Judge Judy. I have enjoyed Judge Judy. She is incredible. Anyway, and so I've been watching a lot of Judge Judy and channel surfing, and watching different things. And in the midst of that, when I left Judge Judy, I, stopped at CNN. And CNN was advertising a documentary on the life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And that got my attention because it was titled the notorious RBG for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but that came from the notorious BIG. Only in America could the notorious BIG and the notorious Ruth Bader Ginsburg could even be spoken in the same sentence. Anyway, it turned out this documentary, which I think is still airing, is just a remarkable story of this remarkable woman's life. I mean, she is absolutely incredible. I mean, I knew that from afar, but I didn't know it in detail. And they told her life. I mean, she has been advocating for the rights and the equality of women and of all people, for children to have sustainable lives. And she has been advocating a voice for the voiceless all of her legal career. And they were interviewing her and talking to her about some of her positions. But then the reporter kind of pivoted and said, your best friend on the court for years was actually somebody you opposed, the late Justice Anton Scalia. The two of you didn't agree on anything. As liberal as you are, he's equally conservative. And she said, where did this friendship come from? And this is what she said. She said, well, we both love opera. And so we and our spouses would go to the opera together. Then she said, we both love to travel. And so we and our spouses used to travel together. And then she said, but most importantly, we both love the Constitution of the United States. And our love for the Constitution and for what this country truly stands for, that's what binds us together. And she got my attention because I realized she saw, maybe unwittingly, that a common love creates a common ground and space where we all can stand. And then she stopped and she said, let me tell you something. She said, you know, the Constitution that we have wasn't always revered in the same way that it is now. We all understand it in a very different way, that in the very beginning, remember, before we had the Constitution, we had the Articles of Confederation, and then we got the Constitution. And it really was a long time before the states were willing to concede some of their state authority and power, if you will, to the federal government. In fact, we had a civil war over that. There was a civil rights movement over that. And we still have issues with that even to this day. But by and large, today we understand that the Constitution is the law of the land. And she said that decision happened in 1803 in a case called Marbury versus Madison. Don't go to sleep on me now. I'm coming to a point. In a case called Marbury versus Madison. And in this case of Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court ruled that, and Justice John Marshall said it this way, the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. And no law passed by any Congress, no order executed by any executive, no law passed by a state assembly, no law passed by a local government, no law that is inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States can be considered American. If it is unconstitutional, it is un-American. Y'all with me now? Stay with me, church. A lawyer came to Jesus one day. Oh, you see where I'm going now. Lawyer came to Jesus one day. He said, great teacher, in a few centuries, they're going to have a case called Marbury versus Madison. But they haven't had that yet in the religious realm. And so I'm here to ask you, what is the supreme law of God? What is the ultimate will of God? What is the supreme decree of God? What is the dream of God? And Jesus reached back to Deuteronomy and reached back to Leviticus. I know y'all didn't know there was anything interesting in Leviticus, but it's there. He reached back to Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and he said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. You shall love your Republican, love your Democrat neighbor, love your conservative, love your LGBTQ, love your Latino, love your Anglo, love your Asian, love your neighbor as yourself. Oh, on these two, this is the supreme law. And I'm going to sit down now. And what Jesus was doing there was giving God's ultimate law for life. To love the God who made us. The God who called creation into being. The God who made us and named us. Even before our mama and daddy named us. Love that God. He didn't have to do it. He didn't create you because you're cute. God did that because God is love. Bible said God is love, and that's what love does. Makes room, plenty good room for all God's children. Love the Lord your God. And love your neighbor. Now to be clear, you don't have to like them. He didn't say like, he said love them. Liking is an emotional reaction. Loving is a decision and a commitment. See what I'm getting at? And yet implicit in loving your neighbor, the mirror reflection of you, the one bearing the image of God, just like you, love your God, love your neighbor, and while you're at it, love yourself. Love yourself. Oh, the reason there's so much ugliness in the world is we have a hard time with that loving of self. And see, what I don't like in me, I project onto you. Are y'all with? I'm giving you some good stuff. Oprah Winfrey would charge you commercials for this. You couldn't afford the psychiatric intervention for this. I'm giving this to you free. No, love the Lord your God, love your neighbor, and love yourself. Oh, I've gotten to the point now. I'm getting old now. And yet every morning, like the old song says, every morning when I rise, I get up and I go to the vanity, unless I'm on the road at a hotel, and then I walk into a wall usually. But if I'm at home, I get up and look in the vanity and turn the light on. And you know the reason they're called vanities is they have lights that make you look better than you actually do. But anyway, I look into the vanity, and I usually don't have my eyeglasses on. And, you know, you kind of wipe the sleep out your eye. And once I do, I look, and I say, Denzel Washington? Is that you? Oh. And then I kiss myself. And my wife says, get back in bed, you old fool. The truth is, we were made by God. And 1 John chapter 4, verse 7 says, Beloved, let us love one another because love is of God. And those who love are born of God and know God because God is love. We were made by the hand of love. We were made by love, for love, to be loved and to loved. And that love will lift us all up. That love will set us all free. That love will change our world, will change our nation, will change our lives, and will change our churches. That love, oh, my grandma used to sing the song, and I'm going to sit down. Y'all know this one? I was sinking deep in sin, far from the distant shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the water he lifted me. Now safe am I. Oh, love lifted me. Love lifted me where nothing else would help. Love lifted me. Now, Easton, go witness to love. God bless you and God keep you. Oh. Oh, God bless you, man. Thank you. Love. Oh, love, brother.